Hello, everybody, and welcome back to You Exchange, the podcast where I exchange my user experiences to change them, and yours for the better. I'm Jeremy, a mentor and senior user researcher with over 8 years of experience and a background in neuroscience. Throughout my career, I've had the privilege of engaging with hundreds of users around the world, spanning across Europe, the USA, Africa, and India. This has allowed me to deliver actionable insights that have improved user experiences with nutrition, automotive, delivery, and e-commerce sectors. I've created this podcast with the aim of providing my mentorship and educational content, offering actionable tips, knowledge, and guidance in the realm of research, specifically focusing on UX research to anyone having an interest in this area. And I hope that you will find this episode insightful. Hello, world, and welcome back to the podcast. Very happy to be back to kickstart this episode dedicated to storytelling. So, this episode is for anyone who has any kind of presentation so far to perform, to run, be it orally, but also delivering a story through a report because they want to make their insights more impactful. They want to make their research more actionable. They want their message to be communicated well and understood correctly. And also, they want all of that so that it has impact on your listeners. And it's also for all of those who want to share a lot of content but don't know how. Or maybe not so much, but still don't know how to share it in a way that is actionable, understandable, and useful. So if you have a presentation coming up, just keep on listening because I'm going to deliver some tips and tricks that can help you up your game. So a disclaimer, before I start. These are some tips and tricks that I used recently and that I came up with through experiment. These are things that worked for me. It doesn't mean it's the recipe to use, but I just want to share my experience because I'm not by any means a pro at storytelling. I just want to improve a little bit every day. And if I can deliver to you all of my lessons in a short form content so that it's condensed, that you learn the most of it without making the same mistakes as I did along the way, well, it's a win-win for me and for you. So, just before we start, just know that this is the output of a thinking that I had recently that completely made knots in my mind. It was really complicated for me because, as I said, I'm not a professional when it comes to storytelling. And I think it's really, really difficult to be able to tell I'm a professional at storytelling. In my opinion, very few are, so I don't consider myself to be a pro. The goal of this episode is really just to share what I came to understand and discover, what worked, what didn't, first of all. And then second of all, I just want to make clear that when I say this works, it's because it worked for me, but also because it had impact. It was highly appreciated. I had positive feedback from all this work and all, let's say, the strategy that I put in place. But again, don't expect a recipe to follow from start to finish, and don't expect it to be exhaustive because as I accumulate experiences, I learn new stuff, and then I will complete all of this with new episodes and new content. But without further ado, let's start. First of all, what is the first mistake I did when it comes to preparing presentations over the years, and how did I learn that this was not the strategy? Okay, so for those who don't know me and that discover the podcast right now, just know I'm a researcher with 10 years of experience. I have a neuroscience background, so very academic background. I then transited to the private sector, where expectations are way different and it has its whole lot of difficulties. You need to be impactful. You need to deliver a message quickly, fast enough, but that contains as much information as possible, and that would be explainable. Let's say I'm exaggerating, but explainable to a teenager, basically, or to anyone who's outside of the project. So this is the first thing. This should be your goal when you communicate any message. I mean, this is the first step, but then, of course, the main issue that I made over the years is not adapting my delivery to the audience. So I thought I could have the same presentation to technical people, then to executives, then to, let's say, project managers, product managers, business people. It's not at all the same. You should always adapt your content. And don't worry, sometimes adapting means taking out some slides, emphasizing some words a bit more, reordering the orders of the, sorry for the redundancy, but reordering the slides. Sometimes it just literally means that, but you should always have in mind who is your audience and how can I adapt my presentation to them. Because tomorrow, if you make a research and you deliver some insights, your insights will not have to be presented the same way if it's to, exaggerating again, the CEO, or to your research manager or your design peers. It's not at all the same. And I'm speaking for research and design, but you can apply these concepts to anyone. For marketing people, for instance, or if you have to make a presentation on sales, a sales pitch, or whatever. So this is really applicable to anyone. And so I think we should all master this kind of craft. And I was not trained. I didn't have proper training. This is the kind of things you don't learn in university, in my opinion, enough. And I'm not alone in this. I know a lot of people who undertook similar studies as mine, and they didn't have a formal training as well. But these are the things you learn and you master through doing. However, I want to communicate some tips. So the first tip is always cater your presentation to the needs of your audience. And I didn't do that enough in the past. And so I could, for instance, bore my listeners with some technical stuff or how I got to the conclusion. Some people are just interested in the conclusion. Some people are literally just interested in tell me what I should do. Then, of course, keep some backup slides with the whys in case they ask. You want to be able to answer the whys in case they ask. So that's an example, for instance. If you present to designers, for instance, you need to show some visuals of the app, of the product, what is working, what is not. If you are presenting to product managers, you will have to put some emphasis on some video clips, quotes from your participants so that they can empathize, for instance. If you present to marketing people, probably you want to present some output of market research, for instance. That's an example. So that's the first really most important thing ever, and this doesn't require any, well, not necessarily at least, any slideshow. You could cater your presentation. By presentation, I mean speech, but the content, just what you say, the words you say. And then, of course, the presentation is here to help. So that's the second point, in my opinion. Before, I used to be, let's say, I don't like I used to be dependent, let's say, of my slides. Meaning, I was thinking really in terms of slides, slideshow, and nothing more. I used to think slide first, and then how can I support the slides with what I do? That's the second mistake. You want your slides to support what you do. This is a support resource. It's not here. You're not a slave to your slides. This needs to be really clear. Because if you think this way, your slides will reflect that. For instance, you will put too much content. You will put too much text into your slides. And again, it really depends on what is the slideshow for. Some slideshows are to be shared and read and not listened to. That's fine. You just need to know the audience and how your content will be consumed. So, coming back to my first point, it's not only about who is the audience. It's also about how are they going to consume the content. If they're going to read it by their own time, on their own time, be it. You can write as much as you want, but even though, be careful, because on their own time, if it's your design partner, probably they have, I'm taking a wild guess here, but probably they have more time than a director, a research director, or a design director. And so then you need, even if this is not to be shared orally, even if this is only a speech, you need to make it easily consumable, let's say. So, do not become a slave of your slides. You need to think speech first and slides second, if at least you're going to give a speech. Always think like that. What is the most captivating in terms of format? Video, meaning image and speech. And then what do you have? Probably only visuals and animations without any sound. So a GIF, let's say. But then you can also have image. And then you would have text. This is the less captivating. So always think about this order. If you speak on a stage and you're delivering a message, this is what most people should have their attention on. Slides second. That's why if you look at the presentations made by the best speakers, I really love the one done by Steve Jobs about the iPhone. They have almost no words on the slides, almost. And they have one central topic at the middle. Sometimes it's an image. And it doesn't need to be pretty. You can see a lot of speakers on the internet and learn from them. How do they share their information? And it doesn't need to be pretty. But really, you need to share things in a way that will be easily digestible. The more you share things in an easy-to-consume format, the better. Reading takes time. Listening takes less time. Listening and viewing content takes even less time. And so, think about that. That's the second point. Of course, do not be a slave to your slides. And the third point, in my opinion, is the most important part. One of the most important parts. And the biggest mistake I did, and the biggest mistake I see everyone doing. I mean, not everyone, but we all tend to some degree to do that, even though we know we shouldn't. To some extent, we all have been doing this same mistake over and over again. The mistake is to craft slides first without anything. Meaning, you know you will have to make a presentation. So you're thinking, what is the tool to prepare presentations? You think about that. So, once you thought about your presentation, you go into PowerPoint or Google Slides or whatever format you use, and you go directly there. Here you're making a shortcut. You're thinking, the format is the presentation and is the slideshow. I need to go there first, and I know why you're thinking this. I mean, I'm not saying you, I am also including myself in this. We are all guilty of this. But my thought process when I do that is, this is a presentation that will be with a slideshow. So to be quicker, let's work directly in the slideshow. Bad idea, wrong idea, to be honest. And I'm gonna tell you two examples that are radically different. One example, I arrive at my second job in which I stayed for 2 years and a half. And I was tasked to make some desk research, literature review, and to give some synthesis when it comes to some topic. What happened is that I did everything in PowerPoint. I needed to share what I found to my boss, let's say 3 weeks later, which was enormous. What happened is, as I started in PowerPoint and I kept on discovering more and more content, I can tell you the PowerPoint was more than 100 slides long. For a 30 minutes meeting, it's absolutely impossible. So just to keep in mind as a lesson, at least for me, and as a reference, they say in general, plan for 1 minute per slide. I think it's reasonable. Some slides can be done in 30 seconds, but I like to give myself the room. So, from this experience, I can tell you it didn't end well. Well, I didn't have any big issue, but at that time, I was a great researcher, but I lacked some communication skills, to be honest. And my manager back then told me, this is not ready. The work is not ready. And this is the big problem, is that you can make an amazing research. You need to communicate it as efficiently as you did it, because then you're not doing it justice. So what happened is that my manager told me, it's not ready. You need to come back to me with something that is ready. And I didn't understand it by then. Then I worked on my storytelling, I worked on my communication, and then I understood what she meant. So she meant basically making it synthesized, making it easy to digest. The problem is it's more than 50% of the work, because it's easy to accumulate content on a slide. And it's easy to make the slides grow. And I will always remember one of my teachers from university told me, we were trained to write articles back then. And so think of this as an example of not always thinking in terms of presentations. It was articles, like academic articles. What happened is we were constrained to write an academic article of a whole study we had done in 2 pages, and we were limited in terms of characters. And it was horrible. The experience was so frustrating. It was giving me anxiety. It was difficult, and everyone was feeling the same. And I will always remember my teacher saying, it will always be more difficult for you to craft your content in less space than in more space, basically. So, I don't know if I'm making sense, but basically, and then this repeated when I did my let's say, when I defended my master's degree internship report that I took 6 months study to do and to write. Okay, and so I was limited to 30 pages with 1.5 I don't know how that's called in English, but the separation between lines, and I had all of these rules to respect. And then I was like, how is that even possible? And to be honest, retrospectively, I did present my work in 30 pages. It was a pain. Retrospectively, now that if you would ask me that, I would do that in 2 pages and I would be satisfied, because this could have been presented in 2, 3, 5 maybe pages, not 30. And what I'm trying to say is that it's easier to accumulate content it's way more difficult to synthesize and to be able to have articulation between your ideas. It's way more difficult. This is a whole new level of work. And you need abstraction of ideas. You need to communicate, to articulate ideas. You need to make them talk to each other. And you need to de-zoom. You need to de-zoom enough. And so that was really painful, but I learned a lot through this process. So that was the first part that I wanted to communicate when I had a presentation to make, and I started right away with the presentation. And now I can tell you, recently I did an experiment in which I forced myself not to touch PowerPoint until my presentation, my logic and my storytelling was ready. And really, it was really a pain, because at some point, it's true, I can tell you, at least my feeling is, if you have only ideas written with sentences, then everyone is different, of course. For me, it worked this way. If I had only ideas written with sentences, I could articulate them as much as possible. As long as I didn't see them on a slide, I always felt stuck in a way. But at some point, everything glued together. Everything made sense, basically. So, my point being, never ever start to work on slides before you know the content of your presentation. And it's the same for product design. It's the same. You can take this analogy. Before making an app or a product, you don't start on Figma. You don't start by coding. You need to know what is the content of the app, what are the features, how do they articulate themselves, what is the information architecture, where are the menus, how do information flows, what is the story we want to tell, what is the experience we want to communicate. Once you know all that, if and only if you know all that, you can start to think about how you represent it. Only at this moment. You don't want to burn steps, because then you're thinking about a million things at the same time. You're thinking about the color, you're thinking about the font, you're thinking about the placement of information on a slide before even thinking about what you say. If you know what you say, you will know the order of the things you say. And then in the order of the things you say, you will know the hierarchy of the things you say. What is more important than what? What needs to be presented before than what? What is the best visual to represent that information? So, I can tell you, recently I did that experience. I did a study, I came up with insights. It was so difficult, to be honest. The insights were so interesting. And I was amazed, and I thought, how can I best present that? I need to find a flow. I need to find an articulation of that. You know? And so I kept thinking, don't touch PowerPoint right now. Just think about the best flow. And everything was written in words. And then I had some evidence, some images, some graphs, some pictures, right? And so I put things, basically, this is my tip. I used a board. It can be a digital board. It can be a physical board. If you're more of a physical person, this is weird to say, I know, but if you're more of a physical person, just print your stuff and display it on a wall, on a blank wall, and then put it together, reorganize, do what you want with your stuff. As long as it's not being presented, you can do what you want. I'm exaggerating, but you have all the time you want, as long as you don't have to present, basically. So think about that. Think about your content first. It's way easier to articulate content first, and then once it's articulating, is this saying a coherent story, basically. So that's really my advice, what I discovered recently. So I first put the things on a board, and then I just started to think, okay, what would be a natural order? It's like maybe making some music. It's like, first, I'm telling about this. Imagine some random flow. Okay, what are users expecting? What are their current needs? Imagine. Not what they expect, but what are their current needs. Okay, we know that. Then, second step, how are we currently solving those needs? Oh, we are not solving it right. Okay, what should we do about this? Oh, probably they said what is missing for us to answer those needs. Okay, third part, what is missing for us to answer those needs? What are they expecting from us in the future? This is one of the most basic flows to tell something in terms of UX design and UX research. And it worked. It worked several times in the past. People told me this is a great articulation, so I hope it helps. Concretely speaking, what I did was taking my board, reordering my ideas, putting them one after the other, and seeing, okay, step A, step B, step C, oh, step D. Oh, okay, step C is not right in this order. Okay, I will put it instead of step A. And that's it. And then I try to read the story and I'm like, does it make sense or not? Am I leading to a certain conclusion up to a certain point or not? So that's basically the idea. So you should lay out, as I said, the components of your story, and always think about when you're reading a book and when you're watching a movie, how does that make you feel? Do you have an example of a movie that's not well narrated, for instance, not well done in terms of storytelling? Do you have examples of book like this? If you have examples, think about this. For instance, we can all know a movie that is absolutely amazing and ends in a way that it's like, what just happened? It's like it puts everything that we learned so far in the movie. Now I'm second guessing everything. So some movies end well like this, but some others it's like it's not appropriate. Basically, it doesn't work. So you can take that as a reference. It's like, oh, I felt this way when I was told this story. I don't want to reproduce that mistake, for instance. And then you can think about other examples. So basically, what were the stories that worked well with you? And I can tell you, we can all of us think about a framework that is really powerful, which is the Pixar framework. So we all know some famous Pixar cartoons, such as Toy Story, or Finding Nemo, or Cars, or whatever. So they always follow more or less the same structure, which is something like, maybe I'm butchering it, but from what I remember, is once upon a time, then the story is set, basically. There was a blah blah blah, a main character of the story, and then it's like something like every day they were doing XYZ, until one day something happens, and then this is the conclusion, more or less. I do not know it by heart. I encourage you to check it, but this is more or less the principle. It's like you should express some kind of tension in the story, okay? Something is happening in the background, then something happens, and then what can we do about this, basically? So this is the mere principle, and there are a lot of variants about that, but I like to keep it simple. So it's like try to express some kind of tension. And so that would be my tips. So basically, you don't have to be a master. That's also something I wanted to mention. You don't have to be a master of storytelling. It can just start by just looking at what you're saying. The 20% you can do to give 80% of the results can start by just looking at what you are about to say in terms of content and how can you best say it before even crafting any visual or any presentation. Just that. And it will help you tremendously because you yourself, you will be able to tell if something isn't right. You will see that directly. So just prepare. There is that. Then another tip I can give you is just try to listen to yourself. Listen to yourself especially, for instance, when you prepare for a job interview. It helps a lot. Try to answer your questions, listen to yourself, and listen to how you sound. Listen how you articulate ideas. And because storytelling is just not at the moment of giving reports, it can be everything, anything, at any moment in time. When someone at a conference is asking for you to introduce yourself, you need to come up with something interesting to captivate. You cannot say, okay, I live here, okay, I don't know, I like going to the gym. No, it doesn't work. You need to introduce yourself in a way that does justice to what you like, to your passions, your hobbies, what brought you here. You have a lot of interesting things to say, so you need to make sure they are communicated effectively. So that's the tip, basically. Lay out the components of your story, reorganize inside of the components, and then once you progress when it comes to storytelling, try to reorganize at different scales. So think about the macro of your story. So the main sections. So for instance, we speak about users' needs. Then what are their expectations? What are their pain points? And so on and so forth. Okay. But once we have the sections, it's good to organize them this way. But we can also think about a more micro or a more macro progression of that. We could think about, if we talk about pains, okay, maybe they are organized in different ways. Maybe the first pain can be not being able to find the content where you expect it to be. The second pain can be, once you find it, what are the following pains? And then once you experience the following pains, what do you expect about this? So imagine that as, let's say, the components of a wall, and then you give it different sizes in terms of perspective. So you can think about bricks, but then inside of each brick you can have several bricks. Take that as an analogy of the Lego set. And so try to, practically speaking, when you organize your story, think about main sections, but then once you think about sections, into every section, try to think about articulation inside of the section. So it's like when you write basically a dissertation. It's like paragraph, inside the paragraph you have a subparagraph, and then a subparagraph, and so on and so forth. And then once you did it at the micro level, you can also do it at the macro level. If I could sum up my whole presentation in 4 sentences, what would they be? I did the exercise, and it was really, really inspiring, because I thought, if I sum up this section into this sentence, maybe it's not the message I want to convey. But actually, the content of the section is this, so there is no other way. Maybe I should just reorder it, basically, reorganize it. So what helps is really take a step back, then take a step closer, basically that. Then I can also encourage you to, when you want to report something, and this works especially for researchers, do not, absolutely not, please report only facts and findings and quotes. And we observed that 3 users out of 10 did that. We observed that 2 users out of 3 did that. No. If I'm presented with that, for me, I don't know how to conclude. I need your input in top of that. What does that mean? 3 users out of that said that. Out of X said they found the interface not user-friendly. Why? First of all, why? Okay, what are the consequences? What does that imply? What can we do about this? Basically. What do we know so far from before the study that we could also inject in this insight to give it thickness and to give it depth, basically? So when you report findings, it's not just findings about one core activity. It's also what happened before this, what will happen after, what are the implications. And yes, you can add your private and personal knowledge to it. You don't have to stick to exactly what was said by the participant. Because if it's that, I sit tomorrow beside the participant and I listen to him or to her. That's it. No, I need an agglomeration of participants who said something, and I need someone to be able to conclude on that and to give directions. It needs to be more than just findings. Also, because if you don't do that, just be assured that your stakeholders will take decisions and will conclude by themselves. And we cannot blame them for that. It's really about we ourselves as human beings. We need to basically come up with explanations to things that don't seem to have any. We need to have explanations for things. So if you don't give explanations, if you don't give insights, if you don't give next steps and so on, your stakeholders or people listening to you will. And you, for sure, don't want to make the mistake of them taking the wrong decision or thinking the wrong things about your insights. So you need to be the owner of your insights, and you need to make sure what you deliver, the message you deliver, is actually what you want to be understood. So basically, it's like user experience research and user experience design. We design things, apps, websites, products, because we have an intention. We have an intention, and the intention is having the user experience something, having the user accomplish a task, whatever. But this is merely an intention, and that's why we test it. We test it to make sure that this intention matches with the reality. When you make a presentation, that's the same. You need to make everything you have in your power to try the best you can for your message to be understood the way you want it to be understood. If you give only 3 users out of 10 thought the platform was not useful, it's not helping anybody. It's giving 5% of the insight, yes, but the other 95% are needed, basically. So that's what I would say. And then, as an exercise, what helped me, I know this will sound a bit cheesy, this will sound really, oh yeah, we knew it, probably, and I'm sorry for that in advance. But really what helped me, for instance, when it came to preparing interviews for jobs, or when it came to prepare a highly limited in time presentation to high-end stakeholders, it's like, you don't have all the time in the world. You need to be impactful. You need to be articulating and using your words the smartest way possible so that the message comes across. What worked for me is really imagining myself, I am in an elevator. Then, of course, you will want to trick yourself and to trick other people. We are all like this. Yes, you can think the elevator of a 30 level building. Okay, maybe, okay. But then we could think about reducing the number of floors. Anyway, the thing is, try to think you're in an elevator and tomorrow you're going until whatever, floor number 10, and you're going from floor 0 and someone enters at floor number 5. You have 5 floors to say what your research is about, what you uncovered, and what are the recommendations. And I say research, but it can be anything. It can say, if you're a designer, what were you designing for, who were you designing for, and why? And what do you expect to accomplish with that? If you're a startup founder, what is the problem you're trying to solve, and why do you think that your solution will address this problem? That's it. That's it. If you're a marketer, yes, this applies to anyone. So basically, the idea of the elevator for me is really the thing that made the difference. It's really trying to imagine how to explain things in a really short amount of time. And it was the same for the dreaded question of the interview process to get a job. Tell me about yourself. You cannot ramble for long, basically. So it's really about that. It's really communicating the message in the shortest amount of time possible. So in France, just to end with a small anecdote, I discovered there was a contest. I don't know if this is also in other countries. This is what I know is from France because I heard it when I was studying there. There is a contest for you to present your your PhD thesis. So at the end of a 3 and sometimes up to 4-year work, because I knew people who did some thesis in 4 years, nothing wrong, it's just the way it's set up to be, it can happen. So you have 1 more year of insights, 1 more year of studies, and so on and so forth. So what happens is there is a contest for which you can present your PhD thesis in 3 minutes. So from the moment I discovered that this was a thing, I was like, I have no excuse. I have no excuse. If I made a study, a research, for instance, and I did it in 1 month and I discovered insights in 1 month, yes, it will be difficult to condense it. But if people, after 3-year research, manage to present things in 3 minutes and get the prize, I can do it. And I know what you will tell me, and I agree partially with you. It's not the same setup. The evaluation criteria is not the same. The expectations from the message to be delivered is not the same because you're expected to be maybe getting an overview of what you did and not getting into detail. This is oftentimes not what is asked by the industry. And I totally agree with you. I'm just saying that the exercise in itself must not be easy for people after a PhD to do that. Because once you know too much, it's really a challenge to make it digestible and easily consumed, basically. However, this is done for this contest, basically. So, it is possible. It is possible to always make the presentation a little bit more digestible. There is always room to improve. And I rather think in terms of what can I improve than just think, no, this is too difficult. I will not do that. I think I'm trying to have this mindset as much as possible, and I think it's useful and it's helpful to have this. So that's it for today's episode. I just wanted to communicate some tips and tricks when it comes to preparing for a presentation that would be not so much technical. I hope you still got some help and you still got some insights from this episode. If this is the case, please, you would do me a huge favor by simply subscribing. That would help me make sure that there is an audience to listen to this content, that it is growing, that I can cater my presentations, such as what I did in this episode, to the audience, and that I can deliver every time more useful content to you. And until the next episode, take care. Bye-bye. And that's it for today's episode. Thank you everyone for joining me today on New Exchange. I hope you found today's episode insightful and valuable. Make sure to subscribe in order for you not to miss the next episode. Share it if you liked it and leave a review. Thank you for your time and attention. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions for future topics, feel free to reach out directly to me. You can find all the details in the show notes. And see you in the next episode. Bye-bye.